Okay, I make it 5 past, and it looks like everyone's here. So hi again, everyone who was already here. Hi for everyone who's just joined. My name is Julien. I will be teaching today's course on, I believe it's ARCHER2 for program developers, or Introduction to ARCHER2 for software developers. I will start off with a quick apology. I'm a last-minute replacement. Unfortunately, the person who was meant to give today's course is ill today, so I will be teaching this course in his stead. He would have done a much better job at this, so I'm a bit rusty on the material. I apologize for that, but hopefully it'll go well. I should know most of the things, and if there's anything that I don't know or anything that I get wrong, my colleague Eleanor is here to tell me whatever I say wrong. And in most of these other courses that I've taught, there's often a lot of people who, like, together we know a lot more. Like, there will be people within the group, within the chat, who know a lot more about about specific parts of the material than I do. So it's always really interesting, and I always come out learning more than I teach from these. But to get started, one thing I will say is whenever I teach these sessions, I am always in a room sitting by myself, staring at a monitor and talking basically to myself, which is not the most fun of things. So by all means, please do be interactive. If you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. The chat is here. You can get to the chat by just clicking the little purple chevron and then clicking on the speech bubble. You can also ask them, like, feel free to unmute yourself, ask them, or you can put your hand up in the middle of your screen. There will be your collaborate screen. There will be a little hand up icon. Please be aware, if you do ask questions out loud, that we are recording the session, so you will be recorded asking the section. You will be recorded if you ask anything out loud. And once this course is finished, we will upload the videos for today's session and Monday's session onto YouTube for other people to see. You are welcome to share and reuse all of the any of the material in this course as you see fit. However, be aware that we, this is the license that we have for the course, so you're allowed to share it, you're allowed to distribute it, as long as you specify that it's a course that was run by EPCC, and as long as you don't profit from it. The final thing, that was it. The final thing I would say is please ask questions, please do chat, do talk if you want, but please be respectful of others and all of those things. Hopefully you've read the terms and conditions when joining the course. Great, so with that, let's get into the actual course side of the course. By sharing the screen. Yeah, that's the one I want to share. I will apologize as well if I'm a bit rusty with, I'm trying a new setup because, why have one challenge when you can have multiple ones? So the first thing I'll say is everything that I'm about to share, everything that I'm about to talk about is available, and the YouTube videos will be made available in the course link, which I'll put in the chat. It's here. So it gives you a brief overview of the course, which you'll all have seen when signing up, but now we've changed it. Now there's now a link to the course material, which if you open, I'll just close these because I'm about to reopen them. If you open it, you'll see that there's a carpentry style instruction page with today's schedule and indeed Monday's schedule. For today, we'll be doing a very quick introduction to ARCHER2, how to connect to ARCHER2, how to run jobs on ARCHER2, what the ARCHER2 system looks like, and that sort of thing. So it should be quite a light Friday. And then on Monday, we will get into probably much more interesting for software developers, how to debug, how to profile your code, and we'll talk a bit about how to be a good ARCHER2 citizen, and discuss things like how to handle large amounts of data, how to copy large amounts of data, that sort of thing. And there is a large part of Monday's session, which is if any of you have any questions about your specific pipeline, about your specific workflow, there's 2 hours set apart for you to ask these questions. I will put a link to the actual course material as well. By the way, please let me know if I'm either too loud, too quiet. If you can, let me know. Let me know definitely if you can't see any of the things that I'm sharing. Hopefully you all can. And the final link that I wanted to chat about is the course chat, which is an Etherpad where if you don't want to ask questions in the video chat, you're welcome to ask them here. I will be looking at this probably a bit less frequently than the Collaborate session, but by all means do ask questions there, and Eleanor and I will monitor it. Cool. So with that, I always like to start these sessions by asking everyone if you could go on the Etherpad and just very briefly write a quick sentence, maybe introducing yourself. We'll make sure to remove this. We'll edit this out of the video, so no one will see any of the details that you put in here, and we'll remove it from the Etherpad at the end of the course as well. But I'll get started. My name is Julien. I am an architect at EPCC. I work as part of the ARCHER2 support team. But if you could give me an idea of, you know, what sort of work you do, what sort of projects you're interested in, I always find that to be quite fun and helps me get an idea of what I should focus on, which bits I should emphasize during the course. I guess let's get started. This first hour, so up until about 11:15, is really to make sure that you're able to get logged into and access ARCHER2. So could I get a quick show of hands? How many people here are able to log into ARCHER2? You just click the hands up icon if you've been able to. I have been. For this course, we've provided a budget with TA01, and you can ask for an account on that if you want to join. But it looks like some of you have, some of you haven't. Cool. I'll just lower my hand. And in which case, if you have, I'll do a tiny bit about data transfers at the end of the session, but other than that, this should be things that you already know. So let's get started. How do we connect to ARCHER2? The login address for ARCHER2 is login.archer2.ac.uk, and you can access it using SSH. When you do that, you'll be asked for a passphrase and a password. So actually, I have been really bad and not logged into my training account, so I'll need to change my password. But the way you do that is to log into ARCHER2, you run SSH -i. I usually recommend doing -i's. Then you give the path to your SSH key. So mine is in .ssh.id_RSA. And then your username. Mine is a very inventive TA081JS, my initials, at login.archer2.ac.uk. And then I press enter. archer2.ac.uk, and now it asks for my password. I need to reset my password really quickly, so just bear with me for a sec. Here we go. I guess, there we go. There we go. When you first log in, actually, let me log into safe here, because that might be helpful. To get an ARCHER2 account, you'll need to log into safe, which is just safe.epcc.ed.app. And then you'll need, if you've not applied for an account, you'll need to create an account and fill out whatever it asks for. I've already got an account on there. Let me get my details. my username is my email address, and my password is not something that I'll be repeating. And when you're on safe, you get a page that looks like this. And here you can edit your details. Here you can find, I'm not sure if everyone has this link, but here you can see all of the projects that you're associated with. You'll see I'm associated with TA081. Here you can go to request login accounts. So if you've not got a login account, you will need to request a login account. The project is TA081 for this course. And you can just click next. It's an ARCHER2 login account. There's only one machine. Click next. And then you can request a username. I tend to go with the name of the project and then my initials, but that's because I have, as you've probably seen, a lot of login accounts, so that just makes it easier for me to remember which is which. You probably want to read the terms and conditions, which are here. And then once you've read them, you can take I accept the terms and conditions. And then if you've already got an SSH key set up, you can choose the SSH key from the file. In this case for me, it would be this one, and it will automatically upload it. When you request a login account, Eleanor and I will get an email saying someone wants access to the project, and we will probably accept it if you're on this course. So in this case, my project is TA081JS, or my login account is TA081JS. And the first time you log into ARCHER2, you will need your password. And you can see your password by clicking View Login Account Password. I've not actually changed my password yet, so I'm not going to do that just yet, but I'll show you in a sec after I've changed it. But basically, you can copy and paste that login account password. And when you first log in, you'll be asked for a password. It is that password, so you just paste it in. Paste it in. There we go. And then it'll say you are required to change your password because it's a temporary password. It says enter login password. And what it wants is exactly the same password again. I'll paste it in. And then it asks for you to input a password. There we go. And once you've done that twice, you log into ARCHER2. So a bit more about passwords. ARCHER2, when you need to set up your password, which I just did, when you first do that, you need to enter a password. And the way that ARCHER2 passwords work is, look at the password policy. Oops, not what I wanted to do. Password policy. The way that ARCHER2 passwords work is your password has to have a minimum length of 18. But for every degree of complication that you add to your password, we will reduce the minimum length by 2 characters. So, for instance, if you use any lowercase letter, then you can write a password which is 16 or less. If you use any uppercase letters, then it can be 16 or less. If you use lowercase and uppercase, it can be 14 or more. So, yeah. So lowercase lets you have a minimum password of length 16. Lowercase plus uppercase is minimum 14. Lowercase uppercase plus any numbers is minimum 12. And then the lowest you can have is if you also use punctuations. So if you've got punctuations, numbers, lowercases, and uppercases, then you can have a minimum password length of size 10. There are some additional conditions. So for instance, you can't have your new password be too similar to your old password. There's no requirements to use multiple character types. You can just use lowercases if you want. A maximum of 2 consecutive identical characters are permitted, but no more than that. So you couldn't just do 18 A's and get away with it. And we also check with dictionaries so that if your password is just a word, we probably wouldn't allow it. So usually the way I choose my password is I try to think of just a phrase. and write that. There's a really interesting XKCD cartoon comic, XKCD, that really describes password strength in a really interesting way, which is that there's this misconception about passwords that a difficult passwords with loads of uppercases, loads of lower cases, numbers, and punctuation are really, really difficult to, are really, really difficult to encrypt. But actually, they're as difficult to encrypt, to decrypt as a longer password that's much more human understandable. I'll actually put this in the chat because it's quite a good it's quite a good comic in general. But the basic idea is, and the basic argument they're trying to do in this is a password like Troubadour and &3 is probably about as difficult to guess, if not easier to guess, even though it looks super complicated and it's terrible to remember from a human point of view. It ends up being easier for a computer to decrypt than something like correct horse battery staple. Just because of the amount of randomness. Just because of the amount of permutations. So it's better to have a long, easy to remember password than a short password that's really difficult to remember. Which there's still a lot of websites that haven't quite gotten that. Like I had to come up with a password for Virgin Media the other day, and they were like, I think they allowed a maximum of 12 characters and insisted on punctuation and numbers and things like that. So when choosing your password, my recommendation is go for a phrase that's meaningful to you, that makes sense to you, and that's a bit longer. Maybe the title of your favorite books or whatever, but rather than going with something complicated. But either works under the ARCHER2 policy. So both Troubadour and 3 and the horse battery staple would work as potential passwords. Cool. So given this, the first exercise for today is here are 4 passwords. Let's start with the first one, my password. How many people think that my password, all lowercase, would be an acceptable password under the ARCHER2 password policy? And just put your hand up if you think it would be. And if you could put your hand up if you think it wouldn't be, that's just to make sure that people are listening. Cool. Yeah. So yes, that's absolutely right. It would not be, and indeed it's a terrible password. If we try the next one, rainbow llama jumping. How many people think that this, put your hand up if you think that this would be a good password and would be accepted under the ARCHER2 policy. So we've got 2 yeses. If we look at it, it's got, I believe it should have 18 characters. 3, 7, where am I? 7, 12, and then jumping is more than 6. So yep, so it's got above 18 characters. It's only got lower cases, but because it's above the 18 character, actually the 16 character minimum limit, it's absolutely fine, and it would be valid and accepted according to the ARCHER2 policy. What about this one? Uppercase A, exclamation mark 94 UFSKL $? Would that be okay under the ARCHER2 policy? So we've got 1 saying yes. Yeah, by all means, please put your hand up if you think yes. Yep, everyone's saying yes, and indeed you're absolutely correct. It would be allowed under the ARCHER2 policy. It's because it's got an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, and a punctuation, the minimum password length is 10. And then the final one is horse battery staple. Who thinks that this would be a valid choice under the ARCHER2 password policy? And please put your hand up if you think it would be. Cool. So Josh says yes, and actually Josh, while this sounds weird, and while I agree that horse battery staple would be a very poor choice of password because it's a password that's online, it's in the XKCD comic that I just sent to everyone, shared with everyone, I think that it would be okay under the ARCHER2 policy. I've not tested it. Oh, okay. Maybe we have banned it because of the associations, and probably also because it's on this course. I think none of these passwords would be a good idea regardless because they're all on this course, but you know, you get the idea. So everyone was correct. Password 1 wouldn't be accepted. It's too short and it's made up of obvious words. Number 2 and 3 would be accepted, and 4 does meet the criteria, but because it's a well-known example, it's not a good one to use. So a bit about SSH keys, and at this point, I'll ask very quickly, does anyone need a hand with generating SSH keys? Well, if I say SSH keys, does everyone know what I mean? And please put your hand up if you do not know what I mean. Oh, cool, that will make it easier. So as well as passwords on ARCHER2, we also ask users to add the public part of an SSH key, and I showed you how to do that on Safe. And whenever you log in, you'll be asked for both your SSH key passphrase and your ARCHER2 password. And actually, the way that the SSH key passphrase works is if you've entered your passphrase once, at least on my system, that's you good for the day, which is why I wasn't asked for and did not need to enter my passphrase when logging in here. It's because I've logged into some of our other systems earlier today. And that's why I went straight to the password without having to put a password phrase. But if you're logging in for the first time, if I were logging in for the first time today, and usually if you're logging in for your first time, you will be asked first for you'll be asked first for your SSH key passphrase and then for your ARCHER2 password. Now, when you generate your SSH key, and actually I might just generate an SSH key right now, we recommend you use SSH keygen. I am using a Linux machine. So there's a question about filling in the SSH keys. I'm happy to go back to that after we've gone through the rest of the lesson, but it's not too difficult. So we recommend in general, we recommend using SSH keygen. I'm using a Linux machine. If you're using a Linux machine or a Mac, it'll be very similar. If you're using a Windows machine and are unsure how to make how to generate an SSH key, it's not too difficult, but it's a bit different. So it might not look exactly the way I'm about to show it. But Eleanor and I are happy to help you get set up with that. But yeah, so to generate an SSH key, you do SSH keygen -t. We recommend using the RSA encryption protocol, and then you just press enter. And then it asks, where do you want to save your key? Default for me, it'll also always save it in my home directory .ssh id_RSA. I definitely do not want to save it there because that's where my current key is, and I don't want to lose that one. But I could save it into ID. Actually, I could do whatever name I want. Course test key. Then it'll ask for a passphrase, and you do have the option of putting in no passphrase. Now, there is no way for the ARCHER2 team to enforce you put in a passphrase. However, because this is a security measure, we would recommend that you do put in a passphrase. So I will. There we go. And then it'll generate a key. You'll get a lovely little picture like this, and which is the keys random art, and it'll tell you it's been generated. It'll tell you the identification key, your private part of the key, is saved in the directory you specified, and the public part of the key is saved in the same directory, but just it's a .pub file. And if I go into my .ssh directory, and ls-lrt, you'll notice the last two things that have been built are the two keys. Now, the private part, SSH keys, you can kind of think of almost as it's your own personal lock and key. The private part of your key is your key that can open your public lock, and you can put the public part of your key onto different systems, and they don't necessarily need to be high-performance systems like ARCHER2. It could be other computers that you use. And when you log in through SSH or through other login methods, you can use that as a method of authentication. And effectively, instead of asking you, do you have a password, it'll ask you, do you have the key that unlocks this specific lock? And so sharing your public part of the key is absolutely fine because it's, in fact, I'm more than happy to show you what's inside. But yeah, sharing the public part of your key is absolutely fine because that's the bit that you put into onto the various machines. Sharing the private part of your key, you should never do that. You should always keep your private key on systems where you feel safe keeping important information. So usually I don't keep them anywhere other than on my local machine, on my laptop. So that's a bit on SSH keys. And there was a question about how do you add an SSH key, and actually that's a great question, which I'll show you again. Because let's pretend that for whatever reason you had forgotten to add an SSH key. You could always go into your account. I'm looking for TA081JS, which is today's course account. Is everything visible, or should I make things a bit bigger? Cool. I'm not hearing any complaints, so I'll assume it's okay. If you go into cool. Great. If you go into safe and then go into your project account, which is in this case TA081JS, you'll see I've got the key I uploaded already and I've already used, but you can add new keys. You can do that by clicking Add Credential. It's an SSH public key. I don't think there's any other choice. So yeah, next. Then here, it'll ask you to enter your key. And there's two ways you can do that. You can either choose a file, and my new key is, there it is, it's this one. So I could choose that and click open. Or you can, if you can't find your key for whatever reason, you can copy the contents of your key, paste them here, then click add. And here you'll notice I've got two keys. The first one is the one I had before. The second one is my the new key that I've set up. You'll see that one says active, that one says pending. If I refresh the page, they'll both say active. And now next time I log in fact, we can try that, though I've forgotten my password already. Oh, no, I might not have. But if I wanted to log in again, I can do SSH -i .ssh / course test key TA081JS at login.2.ac.uk. Now it asks for my key password. And hopefully that's the passphrase. And now I need my ARCHER2 password. And I'm in again. You can also delete credentials if you've got an SSH key and you don't remember what it's for or where it's from. I'm actually going to delete the one I just made because the passphrase I made for it is terrible. You can choose which of the passphrase you want. The one I'm after is the Sindt at Nautilus. It's the new one. Click delete. And then it says that should be removed. And if I go back on my account, I've only got one passphrase again. And if I go back, if I try again with this, actually it won't ask me for a passphrase because SSH, if it doesn't find the SSH key you've specified, will go through a list of other standard SSH keys that it'll test, one of which is ID_RSA. So it'll just pick up that key and it'll just have me straight away for a password. So not the best of examples there, but you know, for which I apologize. So that's how to upload an SSH key. And if it's your first time logging into ARCHER2, once you've uploaded your SSH key, the next thing to do is to view your login account password. So I mentioned at the very start that you always get a temporary password when your account is first set up. And you can see that temporary password by clicking View Login Account Password. And that's the one that I'd reset it to at the start of the session. When you enter that, you're asked immediately to change it with the enter login LDAP password again, and then you're asked to enter your new password and retype your new password. Once you've entered and retyped your new password, your old temporary password is completely meaningless, which is why I'm okay to share it for you. Like, this will not work to log into ARCHER2. If you ever forget your password, you can request a password reset here. I'm not going to click it. Actually, I can't click it because there's a yes/no question now. There didn't used to be. And if you click yes, you will get a new temporary password, which you'll need to put in to change your password when next logging into ARCHER2. I guess the other, very briefly while we're on this page, the other very quick thing I want to talk about is there are a couple of packages on ARCHER2 which are licensed software. And if you have a license for them, you can contact the ARCHER2 team by requesting access to a package. So some of the ones we have are CalStep, BASP 5 and 6 are some of the big ones. PyChem is also quite sought after. And there's the MetOffice Unified Model is on there, for instance. I remember there were a couple of atmospheric people, I'm guessing possibly you use that, but maybe not. I'm not going to request one, and I'll probably be showing you how to do that later anyways. Cool. So we've done at this point how to set up an SSH key, how to log into ARCHER2, how to use your passphrase and SSH key to log into ARCHER2. Hopefully at this stage, everyone should have everything they need to be able to log into ARCHER2. If anyone at this point is not able to log into an ARCHER2 account, it doesn't have to be the TA081 account, though if it is the TA081 account, you are using free budget as opposed to budget that's associated with any project you're on. But if anyone's not able to log into ARCHER2, please let Eleanor and me know in the chat, and we will get in touch to help you either over the break that's coming in the next 20 minutes or right now. But if everyone is happy, I'll give a couple of seconds. I'm happy to move on to how to transfer data to and from the ARCHER2 service. And before I do that, though, please do ask me any questions you may have. Cool, I'm not seeing anything, so let's keep going. There are a couple of ways to transfer data to and from ARCHER2. The three ones that we recommend are the SCP command, which is SSH's secure copy command, rsync, and there's also Globus Online. And the difference between the three of them is SCP is a quick and dirty way of copying small to medium-sized files, maybe a couple of megs or a couple of gigabytes, to and from ARCHER2. rsync is very similar to SCP, though it does have the option of, if for whatever reason your connection dies, you're able to use rsync. There's a partial flag, which means that if your connection dies, you can run the same command, and instead of restarting from 0, it'll restart from wherever it finished. So that can be quite handy if you've got not the best connection. And then Globus Online is for super large amounts of files, of data, like orders of terabytes. And also with Globus Online, you can reach other Globus Online sites. You can always find more information on data transfer mechanisms by looking at the ARCHER2 user and best practice guide. And in general, actually, we've tried to make the ARCHER2 documentations quite helpful. So I'll probably put a link to the ARCHER2 docs because that's always a nice link to have. There we go. Yeah, I think everyone can see that. But yeah, so the ARCHER2 documentations, we've got best practice guides for things like how to connect to ARCHER2, which if I click on that, you'll notice it's very similar to everything we've just talked about so far, though it does have steps for Windows as well. SSH keys, things like that. Got data management, we've got an overview of the system, what hardware we've got, what software environments we've got. We'll be talking about that later today. Running jobs we'll be talking about later today, and loads of different things. We've got information about research software that's available. We'll be talking about that later today. Frequently asked questions, that sort of thing. Like everything I'm about to talk about today is in the documentations, and a lot more. And so in specifically the data management and transfer, we try to give helpful information about how to think about data transfers and how to be efficient with your data transfers. So yeah. So regarding how to transfer data, let us very quickly do an example. Cool. Always go into close, empty directory because I don't know what's in my home directory, or I'm worried about what might be in my home directory. So let's make a small file called hello.txt. Just hi. If I want to copy to ARCHER2, I would run the scp command. It's a tiny file. It'll be for 12 kilobytes. But yeah, so I would use the scp command, and I want to copy hello.txt to ta081js@archer2.ac.uk, and then you've got colon, and after the colon you define a path. So in this case, I just want to go in my home directory. But actually, if I want to be careful about it, I can have the -i flag to point to my SSH key. Press enter. It'll ask me for my password. That's not the right password. That should be the right password. And it transfers it. And you'll see it's taken under a second. If I run ls now, instead of getting nothing, I have hello.txt. And if I look into hello.txt, it says hi. Now this is actually maybe a good point to mention. I got my password wrong, and I will be getting my password wrong multiple times over the course of this session. ARCHER2 has a password policy, which is you can get your password wrong. That's fine. If you ever have 10 failed logins within 10 minutes of one another, then you will be fail to ban. You will be unable to log into ARCHER2 for a 10-minute cooldown period. And this is to prevent anyone who's trying to brute force access into ARCHER2. So be aware that if for whatever reason you've forgotten your password and you try and you try and you try to log in and it's just not working, and then you're sure you're using the right password and it still doesn't work, that might be because you need to give it a 10-minute cooldown period. You can also copy from ARCHER2 to back. I don't actually know my IP address, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But the way you do that is rsync hello.txt to user at location, or you could also do user at IP address colon and then path to copy. So that is data transfer. Now, some best practices of data transfer are when you're about to transfer data, here are some points that you may want to consider. The first one is not all data are equal, or not all data is equal. I tend to use singular data, which is terrible, and people who speak Latin will hate me for it. But yeah, so make sure you know what data you have and make sure that you know which bits of your data are critical. There's never any point copying terabytes of data that you could generate again in 5 minutes, because you could generate it again in 5 minutes. However, if it's that one run that you've been, spending months and months to get ready and it's finally done and everything, you probably want to transfer it and save it and have it in multiple locations. So when you're copying data, have a think about what your critical data is, like what the critical data that needs to be copied is. Select only the data that you think is critical. You don't need to copy everything. You can be selective when you copy things. And have a think about, like, why do you need it in a different location? Which data might be easier to regenerate rather than transfer, and things like that. Yeah, I see that, Joe, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can I just speak?
Yeah, of course.
Is there a way to directly transfer to Jasmine?
There may be. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. If you have, I guess part of the problem is I don't know what the requirements for transferring into Jasmine are. But if you have if you've got a user account and the name of Jasmine you should be able to SCP directly into it, I suspect.
So they use an SSH key as well.
Okay, so what you can do is generate an SSH. Well, you can either generate an SSH key on Jasmine to upload to Safe, so that you can log in from Jasmine to ARCHER2, or you could generate an SSH key on ARCHER2, which you can upload to, I'm not sure what the equivalent is for Jasmine, so that you can copy from ARCHER2 to Safe. And actually, thank you very much. That reminds me of, if I wanted to, I mentioned that I don't know the IP address of my machine. If I wanted to pull something from ARCHER2 rather than push something from ARCHER2, so let's say move hello text to hi from archer2.txt, I could run the exact same command, but backwards. Sorry, we'll get back to the Jasmine thing in a sec. But if I do, there we go, hi from archer2.txt, and copy it here, it'll ask for my password. And there we go, it's copied across, and now I've got the file from ARCHER2 is now on my home system. And so the point that I'm trying to make with Jasmine is you could generate an SSH key on Jasmine, upload it onto ARCHER2, and that would give you the ability from Jasmine to copy files to ARCHER2 or to copy files from ARCHER2. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Cool. Thanks for the question. So data, know which data is important. You can minimize the data that you're transferring. So there's ways of, there are loads of tricks with transferring data. One of the tricks that I love is if you're transferring a ton of small data files, it's still worth collating them together in a single file, like a tarball, or like even an uncompressed tarball, because for every single file that you copy, there is an encryption overhead. So if you copy hundreds of small files, there will be an encryption overhead for every single file, which means that your transfer will take forever. If you collate all of those hundreds of files, or put them all into a single tarball file, you can copy a single file, which will have which will have exactly the same overhead as any single one of those hundreds of files you were copying originally, which means that your full transfer will be way faster. So minimize the number of files you're transferring at that point. Minimize the data you're transferring. The other thing that you can do, especially if you're already going down the tarring route, is you can compress your files. Now, compression is a bit of sometimes it helps, sometimes it hinders, because compression obviously has a time cost. And there are some times where the amount of time you end up taking compressing is longer than the amount of time you're saving when transferring. So always bear that in mind. And yeah, the encryption overheads are pretty much the same as the minimizing the number of files. You can also reduce the encryption overheads by using slightly, what's the way of saying that? Slightly less stringent encryption. The one we recommend you use is the AES 128-CTR protocol, which is available in most SSH versions and is a really fast performing cipher. So at this point, there is an exercise which is using the documentations, the data management and transfer. Could you find a command that you would use to compress an to create an uncompressed zip archive of all of the data within a directory called large data output? That's step one. And then step two would be, how would you test to check that you've not created a corrupted file? So I'm going to leave that as a quick exercise for you to do. And if I give you 5 minutes, by all means, please enter your solutions into the chat, and I'll also have a wee look, and then we can look at the solutions together. While we're doing that, I'm happy to answer any further questions that anyone might have. Oh, and regarding Joe's question, Eleanor has put in a link. There's a specific link in the Jasmine documentations, which are there to help transfer onto ARCHER2, to help facilitate data transfer onto ARCHER2. Yeah, Joe, you have a question?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a specific question to me. I transferred pretty much everything from Archer to ARCHER2, obviously when the transfer was occurring. And I see in Safe that my work directory usage is about 607,000 gigabytes, which sounds right because I transferred everything for the model that I use. But I've just gone into my work directory and there's nothing there. And I'm kind of confused.
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe it's something we can talk about over the break. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that might be a good idea. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, no worries.
Yeah.
So there's a question about how to use your SSH key, and you. So when you specify the path for SSH -i, it's whatever path you saved it at. So that was a terrible sentence. I'll demonstrate, it'll be easier. That's because it's I've got it here, don't I? There we go. Too many windows. There we are. When you run SSH keygen, here it tells you enter your path, and I don't know, let's say I'm /json/.ssh/ actually let's not go .ssh, let's go new temp. Is that what I've called the new file? Yes. New tmp/test key. The path which I'm specifying here is the path in which my key is going to be. So now it'll ask for a passphrase. I'm not going to put one in because I'm not going to use this key. I'll be deleting it straight away. And now it's generated it. And if I look in the path that I used here, actually, you can see that test key and testkey.pub are in that directory. So if I were to SSH, let's suppose that I'd uploaded my testkey.pub onto Safe, which I'm not going to do because it's a terribly encrypted key. The encryption isn't bad, the password is terrible. If I were to SSH into ARCHER2 with this key, I would run SSH -i, and then I would quite literally just copy whatever path I'd set there. And that's the path to my key. And then my user account at login.archer2.ac.uk. Now, one thing I want to check real quick is it looks like you've stored it at /path/2/file, and that might not be a path that exists, so you might not have generated your SSH key. You want to set it to a place within your directory, a place that you have control of. So you'll notice here I've always made sure to put it in my home directory.
Yeah. Yes, thanks. Maybe I just copy that pub file but forgot the directory. That's the problem.
So if you're wanting to, if you've uploaded the key onto Safe, have you uploaded the key onto Safe?
No, not uploaded.
Right. So the first step you'll need to do is you'll need to run this.pub to get a copy of your SSH key, and then you'll need to go onto Safe. You'll need to go onto Safe and add credentials. Okay. While you're doing that, I'll ask, does anyone have any suggested solutions for how to create an uncompressed zip file? I never remember with zip files, so I think it's going to be like gzip minus something 0, isn't it? So that's telling you about tar. That's telling you about zip. There we go. Minus R lets you, it's recursive, so it lets you compress the directory. And then just minus number represents the level of compression. So if you use -0, or the minus sign is usually just flag. So if you use the 0 flag, you will not be compressing anything. So zip -0R of a directory called my data will zip something with no compression. And indeed, if we look at the answer, you'll see that it says if you've got the directory like that, you want them -R because it's a directory, you want the -0 because it's you want 0 compression, and you can actually combine them. Sometimes you can't, but you can actually combine them to do a zip -0R large data output.zip, so name of the zip file, and then the name of your file. Anyone wanted to check that that was the case? Actually, I can do it on ARCHER2, might as well. You'll see there's a file there, and if I just run ls test, you'll see there's stuff in that file. If I run zip -0R test.zip test, it compresses things, and if I do du -sh test, it's tests, isn't it? There we go. That's about 52K. And if I do that on test.zip, it's 40K. Oh, there is some level. Probably some file overheads is probably what that is, but they're very close. Let's remove test.zip. So here I combined the 0 and the R together, but I could do -0 -R. It does exactly the same thing. Now, if you want to verify the archive, if you do zip help, it'll usually tell you there's a -t, which is test the integrity of a zip file. So presumably, if I did zip -t or -t test.zip, it'll test and it tells me it's okay. If we look at the solution, zip -t of the zip file is the correct answer. I never remember these commands, so I very frequently make use of the help command for most things, just to remember what does what. Cool, so at this point it's 11, which means we're exactly on time. Hopefully in this session you'll have learned how to and gotten some way towards logging into ARCHER2. You'll have learned about the ARCHER2 password policy, and as well as the ARCHER2 documentations, and you'll have learned about a couple of the ways that we can transfer data to and from ARCHER2, and also ways of doing that. I believe we're now due a 15-minute break. I will definitely be staying on. I think maybe Eleanor will probably be staying on as well to answer any questions like the question that Joe had, or also to help anyone who's not been able to log into ARCHER2 and needs help. If you need assistance, if you need help to log into ARCHER2, please let us know now, because this is probably one of the best and easiest times that we can really give you a hand and try to get you to have access to ARCHER2. Because going forward, it'll probably be more useful for you to try out the commands rather than watch me doing them. But yeah, with that, we will start again at, I believe it'll be 11:15. So I guess I'll see those of you who don't have any questions in 15 minutes, and I'll happily answer questions from anyone who does have questions or help anyone who needs help with anything. But yes, Joe's question. Before I answer your question, Joe, I want to check, this will be recorded. We'll probably be cutting this out anyways, but is it okay with you if this is recorded, or would you rather we go into a breakout room where it's not recorded to talk about this?
Oh no, I'm fine with it being recorded.
Cool. But then people will know that I don't know anything about what I'm talking about.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
I'm currently.
Could I ask?
Sorry. Yes.
No. Could I ask for your username real quick?
It's EEJB.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So there's about 607 terabytes that are being used in your work directory.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I CD'd into work NO2 EJB, but there's nothing there. Which,
Okay.
to be fair, I've used Archer for about 10 years. In fact, I used to use it when it was Hector. But I haven't admittedly used it for at least a year, I think, since the big transfer. So it's possible I've just forgotten which directories I have. Been on so many projects.
It's weird to have so much data and for it not to be present in /work. Could you have a wee check of the, I guess it would be work/NO2/shared and /work/NO2/NO2/shared.
So sorry, can you say that again? I've got work NO2 shared.
Oh, I've copied them into the chat, so you can just
right.
Copy paste them if you want.
Right. So work NO2 shared. There's certainly things there.
And I think you probably want to run something like ls-lrt and pipe that into grep user, which will put up only the files that you own.
No, there's nothing there.
Okay.
Let me try work N02. That's usually the one I go into. One either.
Okay. In which case, I think probably the best way to do this is I won't be able to help you very much without having access to, well, I mean, I don't think this is something I would be able to help you with, but the ARCHER2 systems team may be able to help you with this. I recommend you send an email to the ARCHER2 service desk, which you can reach at support@archer2.ac.uk. And again, I've put the email address in the chat.
Great.
But if you send an email to them, say that you had a talk, say that you were talking to me about it if you want, and that I recommended it maybe, or that I suggested that the systems team have a look at it, and it'll get assigned to the systems team, and hopefully they'll have a look at it and be able to tell you where your data is.
Yes, but it still exists. If it's on safe, it's definitely there, right?
So there's a weird technicality, which is that safe is updated every morning at 7 a.m.
Right.
So if it's on safe, that means that it was there at 7 a.m. this morning.
Right. So there's, that makes, and I haven't actually gone on since then, so that makes sense. Okay. Okay, thank you. I'll send some support.
Great. So I'm sorry I couldn't solve this.
That's fine. I'd like to apologize in advance. I'm teaching at the moment, and although I'm not actually teaching today, students might pop into my office because I have office hours, so I might disappear and have
that's absolutely fine. As long as your microphone is muted, I'm
Thank you.
No worries. So we'll get started. In this session, I will be talking, giving an overview of the ARCHER2 system, showing you where things are, that sort of thing. As I said before, I'm going to lower everyone's hands. As I said before, it would be very helpful if you're on the ARCHER2 system. That way you can look at things yourself, try things out yourselves. Could I ask, if you have not yet been able to log into ARCHER2, could you put your hand up? Great, thanks for letting us know. Hopefully Eleanor will contact you on private message to try to help you, and if not, I will happily help you try to get logged in during the lunch break at the end after the session. The session's probably not the most important to have access to it, but it's nice to have a play around with it. Great. So with that, let's get started with an overview of the ARCHER2 system. So cool. Thank you. So the ARCHER2 system is a HPE Cray EX system, and it consists of a number of different nodes. There are the login nodes, which if you've logged into ARCHER2, you will have seen. And actually, let's go here. The login nodes, they're the first ones you see when you log in. And you can tell that they're login nodes because they have names like LN for login node 01. We've also got the compute nodes. There are about 5,800 compute nodes. And those are the nodes that you send jobs to when they run. And then finally, there are the data analysis nodes, also called pre or post-processing nodes, which are nodes that basically they're nodes that are there for running smallish jobs. They're shared between users. Most of the whenever you run on the compute node, you'll usually have your own compute node, but the data analysis nodes, you can ask for up to a quarter of a node to do some post-analysis, maybe some data visualization, that sort of thing. All of the nodes have the same type of processors. Each node has two AMD EPYC Zen 2 7742 2.25 gigahertz 64 core processors, and all nodes are dual sockets, which means that there's 128 physical cores per node. We've got multi-threading, like it is possible to use multi-threading, which means that you can have up to 256 threads per node. Okay. The ARCHER2 architecture, the way it looks is when you log in using SSH, you go on the login nodes. Whenever you upload or download data, you're uploading or downloading via the login nodes. You can also get directly into the data analysis nodes, but I'm not going to be showing that in this course. Now, the login nodes can see both the home and the work directory, and also the solid state directory drive. I always forget that there's that one. And if I go, I'm going to close some of these because there's too many of these. If I go here, my present working directory is /home/ this project, my user thing. So I'm currently on the home directory from the login node. I can also go into the /work directory. Type ls, you'll see there's a ton of different projects. I can't access most of those, but we'll get to that in a sec. So I can access the work directory. There's also a solid state drive, which I'm not sure if it's mounted everywhere yet. Having a wee look. It might not be mounted yet, so there it is, Scratch. It's mounted on the login node, and if I click ls, there's not many files there because we're in the process of testing it. But there's also a Scratch directory, which is the solid state drive. So let's go back to home. So from the login node, I can see all of the disks. Now the compute nodes, from the login nodes, I can submit jobs to the compute nodes by using the Slurm batch system. And we'll be talking a lot more about Slurm after the break. But if I want to submit a job, I submit it into the job scheduler, which is the Slurm job scheduler. It'll go into the queue, and then when my job becomes the next job that needs to run, it will be submitted and run on the compute nodes. The compute nodes are not the same as the login nodes, and the compute nodes cannot see everything that the login nodes can see. So you'll notice that while work and the solid state are shared between these nodes, only the login node can see the /home drive, the /home directory. The /home directory is backed up. There is a backup of the /home directory, offsite backup. It is there for disaster recovery purposes only. We'll probably talk a bit more about that further down the line. But the important thing here is, the important part of that phrase is disaster recovery. Disasters are, the site on which ARCHER2, in which ARCHER2 is hosted. If that were to explode, there would still be a copy of your data in the home directory. If you accidentally deleted things, that's not a disaster. So be aware of what we mean by disaster recovery. The work in the solid state drives are not backed up. At least they're not offsite backups. There are local backups that you can access, but there is no offsite backup, which means that if they get completely corrupted, you will not be able to access any of the data on there. So one of the things that we strongly recommend is anything that is project critical, that code you've been working on for years, that one tiny file that you know is super important, we recommend keep it on home because that's backed up. Anything else, anything like anything that you've produced, data that you produce, that sort of thing, you can keep on work. So home is for anything you need to have access to produce and generate the data you've been producing and generating, and the data that you've been generating should be on work. Now, there's a question in the chat about, could I talk a bit more about the solid state? Yeah, I'm sure I will in a sec. But basically, the solid state drive is a solid state drive is a file system. Is a disk with very, very high input-output. So it's great for reading lots of little files or reading a large file on a lot of processors very quickly, or writing to a ton of files at the same time. But it's very expensive, so there's much less storage for it. And speaking of storage, I probably get this wrong, but I think roughly that the home directory has about 1 terabyte. The work directory has about 1 petabyte. Work directory has 14.5 petabytes, and the solid state is about 1 petabyte. And now we'll get to the answers because I think that's the next bit. Oh, no, we're talking about the compute nodes first. So there are 5,860 compute nodes on ARCHER2, which comes out to just under 750,000 compute cores. There are also 5,000, of those 5,860, 5,276 of those are standard compute nodes with 256 gigabytes of memory per node, which is roughly 2 gigs per core. And there are also 584 high memory nodes, which have double the memory, so 512 gigabytes of memory per node. All of these compute nodes are linked together using the high-performance Cray slingshot interconnect. Actually, I'd like to take a small second to talk about the interconnect because it's kind of, the thing that makes ARCHER2 be a supercomputer as opposed to just a lot of really good computers put together. At its lowest level, you could build a computer cluster by having a couple of computers and a router. And provided that you've got both of your computers plugged into the router, they should be able to communicate with one another. Now, as you improve the efficiency of the router, of that mechanism of communication, as you make the communication become less and less, you get to a state where you can almost think of your two separate computers start to act as if they're just a single bigger computer because they can communicate with one another very, very quickly. Now, the Cray slingshot interconnect is effectively that. It is a super fast router that allows super fast communication from node to node. And the faster that communication is, the more likely you are to get a large number of computers to act as if they're one. In terms of memory, in terms of time that you lose in computations. So if anyone ever asks what makes a supercomputer, it's always the interconnect. Cool. So here's a comparison between the ARCHER2 and the ARCHER nodes. I'm aware that there's at least one person who was using the ARCHER system. So in terms of comparison, there's 128 cores per node on ARCHER2 versus 24 on ARCHER, so that's about 5 times. You'll notice that the ARCHER cores had a faster clock rate, which means computations could be done more quickly, or they could do more computations more quickly. But actually, just because there's so many more cores on ARCHER2, the ARCHER2 nodes are way bigger. The ARCHER2 nodes are split into 8 NUMA regions. Now, a NUMA region is a non-uniform memory access region. Basically, what that means is, you know how I mentioned that each ARCHER2 node has 2 processors, and each processor has 64 cores. 64 is a really large number. So to try to speed up communication for smaller jobs, what processor developers do is they'll sort of group cores within each processor together into a smaller region, like a subregion, where the cores within that subregion can access certain levels of memory faster than the cores outside of that subregion. So on the ARCHER2 processors, each processor has 4 NUMA region. Because there's 2 processors, that means that there's 8 in total on the node. And each NUMA region has 16 cores. And those 16 cores are able to communicate with any of the other 15 cores within their NUMA region much faster than they can communicate with cores within different NUMA regions. Memory capacity is 250. I feel I've said most of this. And then, yeah, memory bandwidth and interconnect bandwidth are the bits that are really interesting. More than a memory bandwidth of greater than 380 gigabytes per second is about 3 times faster than an Archer, and that means that, you know, like, effectively the speed to get to memory is much faster, and likewise the interconnect, the connection, the communication between each node is significantly faster than an Archer, and it was already very fast on Archer. I heard that there was a question. One sec. Will the MPI rank of all cores in a NUMA region be contiguous? I'm not sure I understand the question.
So
Yep.
To make use of the better memory bandwidth between different cores in a NUMA region, you need to know, like, from your program, which cores are in a NUMA region. So
Right,
say if I have
your
like
question.
an MPI process with 32 ranks, would I know that like rank 0 to 15 are in one NUMA region and 16 to 31 are in the other NUMA region? Because
that
then I
makes
can,
sense. Thank you.
yeah.
Thanks for the clarification. Yes, they would be. So 0 to 15 are NUMA region 0, 16 to 31 are NUMA region 1, etc., etc. And there's actually, we'll talk a lot more about this afternoon, but there's actually Slurm commands that you can use to ensure that you're spreading your tasks in exactly the way you want across NUMA regions. So if you're using, say, hybrid MPI plus OpenMP, you can ensure that your MPI ranks are spread across NUMA regions so that each OpenMP threads that are done per MPI rank stay within a NUMA region, that sort of thing.
That's great.
But yeah, they are contiguous. No worries. Cool, so that's enough about compute nodes, and now let's find out how terribly I was wrong about storage. So there are 4 types of storage. You've got the home directory, the work directory, the solid state, and then RDF as a system is a bit special, and I'm probably not going to get into that very much today. So home, hey, I was right, it is 1 petabyte of storage, and every user has their own home directory, which is in /home/your project ID /your sub project ID /your user ID. So when I'm on home, you'll notice that I'm on /home/TA081, which is the name of the project ID that I'm on. TA081, there's only 1 sub-project for this, and then my username. Now, home file system in the home directory, there's a potential confusion for anyone who's used Linux specifically between the home file system, which is the storage system on ARCHER2, and what your home directory is, which is a Linux concept. Now, it happens in this case that they're both the same, but or in my case that they're both the same. But basically, you can always, on any Linux system, return to your home directory by doing cd tilde. It just so happens that my home directory is on the home file system. The home file system is the actual data storage space on which my home directory is. But my home directory is a part of the system, if that makes sense. You can view your file system quotas, so how much space you have by logging into Safe. I am, excellent. And if I go into TA081JS, you'll see that here it tells me I'm using 1 gig on home, 1 gig on work, and I've got up to 100 gigs on home and up to 500 gigs on work. I've got no files in home, though I do now, and 18 files in work. So when I say though I do now, it's because if I press ls, you'll see that there's the hi from ARCHER2 text file. And the reason it doesn't show up on Safe is because Safe is updated once a day, every morning at I think it's around 7. And anything that happens within your files between 7 a.m. today and 7 a.m. tomorrow will not be automatically updated on Safe until tomorrow. So likewise, my resource pool, I've used some of my budget. If I run any more today, this won't update until tomorrow morning. If we look at a different account, let's go with this one. This one is the one that I use for some of my support work on ARCHER2. You'll notice I've got a lot more budget. You'll also notice that I've got much larger quotas. It is possible, as you can see, to have multiple accounts, and with each account to have a different associated amount of budget, a different quota, that sort of thing. But yeah, so your home and your work resources are shown here. This is what I want. So I mentioned sub-projects, and sub-projects are a bit weird, but it is possible, it's possible to split some resources into sub-projects. So this is probably more interesting for anyone who's a project manager or a primary investigator on any ARCHER2 project. But if I go back on Safe and go into the TA081 in here, you can, where would it be? Project members, accounts, mailing. I'm not sure. Well, maybe I need to be a PI. There we go. Manage time allocations. Here you see we've got the TA081, and there's also a sub-project called TA081 Reserve, which has some core hours in reserve in case I need some more or in case someone needs some more. And if you are the project manager for a project, you'll be able to see all of the subgroups, and actually, there's information on how you can move money from subgroup to subgroup. You can also create new subgroups, allow certain users to have access to some subgroups but not others, all that sort of thing. But again, that's maybe outside the scope of this course and only of interest to anyone who is a project manager or a primary investigator for any project on ARCHER2. And if you have any questions about that sort of thing, there's an excellent guide that was probably very hard to see. But at the bottom of the Safe page, there's a Safe website guide, which if you click on it, gives you information for users who've done most of that. But if you're a PI or a project manager, this Safe for PIs and project manager tells you how to do sub-budgets, how to give resources to people, all that sort of thing. Sorry, that was a bit of an aside. So yeah, sub-projects are often used on larger projects to allow you to split your resources across multiple sub-projects and ensure that the people who are on sub-project A don't use the funds for sub-project B's project. The work directory, so everyone, the work file system. Everyone has a home file system. Everyone also has a work file system. If you go to work/TA081/TA081/ your username, you are in your work directory. And we were in, I showed you what was in mine earlier today. But yeah, this one has 14.5 petabytes of data. I'm doing good on the remembering not very useful numbers here. But yeah, so every user has the work directory, and this is shared amongst all nodes on ARCHER2. The login nodes can see it, the compute nodes can see it, the data analysis nodes can see it. It's shared across all jobs on ARCHER2. The home directory is not. The home file system is not, so your home directory is not. So that's an important thing to bear in mind, because when you're first running on ARCHER2, you might notice I submitted a job and it doesn't, it's saying can't access the data. If you get that, quite often, the first thing to check is, are you running from your, are you sure you're running from work, or are you accidentally running from the home file system? If you're running from the home file system, the compute nodes can't see it, so they're not going to be able to access any of the data there. They won't be able to run the job. Make sure you're launching things from work. So I mentioned that Safe only updates your quota and informations once a day. For the work file system, there's this handy little command, which I'm just going to copy paste, which tells you, that's because it's one, which tells you how much space is being used by here. Now there's a couple of processes, yep. In all of /work, if I do this. So if you input your project, it'll tell you how much space are you using, and it's saying hardly any at all. I'm actually surprised it's so low. I guess maybe it only starts counting, because it's human readable, and gee, yeah. If you want specifically for your amount of data, like how much you're using, you would use HU and then input your username. And hopefully it's still 0, because it's still 0. So I'm actually quite surprised that it is 0, because it shouldn't be 0. I'll have a look into that after the talk. Yeah, Joe, you've got a question?
Yeah, I just tried to do that, and I get the error, LFS quota name and mount points must be specified.
Right, so that's, I suspect, is, here I've done LFS quota, let's go with user, minus H, human readable. H just means human readable, so it'll make the numbers, if you're using terabytes instead of having like a huge string, it'll do 15 terabytes. Username, and then you've got to specify which file system you're looking at. In this case, I'm specifying work.
Right.
So I suspect that's what it's missing. Yeah. Cool. So here, there's a final note which says, you'll notice here quota is 0K. That means that there are no user quotas in place. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a project quota. You're still bound by the overall project quota. And actually, that's something we'll talk about a bit more on Monday. But on ARCHER2, when you're part of a project, the resources are all shared. So everyone's part of the TA081 project. That means that we all share the compute time. If we go back to here. Because they're TA01 resources, these 20 node hours of compute time are shared amongst everyone who's got an account under the TA081 budget. This 100 gigs in home are shared amongst everyone who's got an account on under this budget. So if someone decided to upload 99 gigs worth of files over lunch, that would leave 1 gig for everyone else. And we'd hit, we wouldn't be able to do some of the work. So always be aware that you are sharing these resources. And unless someone has set up a specific sub-project just for you, all of these resources that you see, they're not just for you, they're for everyone in the project. So the solid state storage, it's available. It will be available on the compute nodes, and it's I think it is available, but we're currently testing it. We're hoping for it to be available more widely from the start of January. At least that's my understanding. And yeah, as I said, it's designed for highest read and write performance in order to improve the performance of workloads that are I/O bound. While ARCHER2 doesn't have any GPUs, any graphical cards, having high I/O is super important for anyone who's doing things like machine learning, for instance, but there's also a number of other applications where having a high read write is important. A very fast read write is important. We will be implementing access, so you should be able to access the solid state storage through Slurm. And again, I've said this before, but to emphasize again, it's not backed up, and there's a total of 1.1 petabytes usable for the entire system. The data on the solid state storage is transient, so at the end of your job, anything that you've moved onto or produced on the solid state drive will be deleted. So it's important to include in your job time for things to be copied onto there and for things to be copied off of them there at the end. And then RDF as a service, there are two drives, which are the EPCC or general drive file systems, which are part of the RDF, and you're able to access this on ARCHER2. If you've already got access to them, you're still able to get access to them, basically. But if you don't have access to the RDF as a service yet, don't worry too much about that part. And actually, I'd be interested in a show of hands, how many of you do have access to or are interested in using the RDF as a service, are already using the RDF as a service? Could you put your hand up if you are? Cool, that makes it easier. Let's just skip this bit. Cool. So the last thing I want to talk about before we go on to lunch is data sharing. I'll do everything from the work directory, but if I go up one directory, and let's say this directory is the directory of my colleague who is unable to give the course today. It is their personal work directory. If I try to go into it, I don't have the permissions for that. And that's true for all directories here. So what do I do if William, my colleague, has a file that he wants to get to me? Well, because we're in the same project, there is a project shared file, which is this one, just shared. And anyone who's part of the TA081 project will be able to see files in the shared file. So if I do this, if I do this, then anyone who's got access to the TA081 shared file will be able to run this command, which I'm going to paste into the chat, and see that output, because that file is shared amongst everyone. Because that file is shared amongst everyone who has access to this project code. Okay, that's nice. But what if instead of being in the same project as me, what if William didn't have access to the TA081 project? Is there any way that I can share data with him then? And yes, there is. If instead of going in the work TA081, TA081, I go one up into the top project directory, you'll notice that there's also a shared file here. Go in there, and I can do this. And now, anyone who has any account on ARCHER2 can run this command. And be able to see that output. And if anyone does not have a TA081 account, you're welcome to try that command and see that it is, that this is true. And actually, just to hammer the point in, I'll just log into a different account. There we go. So here, if I run present working directory, you'll notice this is under my Z19 account. And if I try the first command, the one where I said only people within my project can look in there, I get a permission denied. But if I try the second one, the one where everyone on ARCHER2 can see it, I get to see it. Cool. Now, every single project has a shared file, has a top-level shared file and a lower-level shared file. Only members of that project are allowed to write into it, for the very simple reason that only members of that project are able to get to that directory. There are loads of projects here. Let's go Z19 there. There it is. If I want to try to go to Z19, it lets me. I can even go into shared. And if I try to do txt, I think it shouldn't let me do this, but let's try. There, it said file cannot open file for writing. And all that's telling me is, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to write in this directory because I'm not part of the Z19 project. But I'm still able to see anything that anyone from the Z19 project has copied into there. And you'll notice that I, from my other account, have copied things into there. Cool. So if you ever want to share anything with anyone, well, a couple of things I want to talk about. The first one is if you ever want to share anything with anyone on ARCHER2 who's not part of your project, you'll have to put it in the shared directory. However, unfortunately, that means that everyone on ARCHER2 potentially can see this. So be aware and be careful about what you copy into the top level shared directory, because anyone on ARCHER2 can see this. If it is possible to copy things that are sensitive, provided that you password encrypt them, and there's ways of password encrypting them. If you're unsure how to do that, you can send in an email to the ARCHER2 support team, who will be happy to help you. And actually, that's true for if you're ever stuck on something and you've not been able to find it in the documentations, by all means, please do contact the ARCHER2 support team. We're here to help with that sort of thing. You can find us at support@archer2.ac.uk, and we'll be able to help you to encrypt anything that you want to put in shared, because you don't want someone to, you don't want everyone to be able to see your file. If you want people to see it, also please make sure that you've got the correct permissions. So if I go into shared, you'll see at the moment I've got all of ARCHER2 can read. So the way permissions work are they've either got a read, a write, and an execute. This is not an executable, but they've got 3 sets of instructions. They've got read, write, and execute for the owner of the file, which in this case is me, the group of which the owner is a member, in which case it's group TA081, and everyone else. Yeah. At this moment, I can read and write, and everyone else can read the file that I've put in there. However, I can use the chmod command, for instance, to is it -r. So I'm saying chmod change everyone's access is no longer allowed to read. And if I do ls -lrt, that's all. Let's I always get that one wrong. Let's let u +r. That way I can read it. And as I said, I always forget these things. It's others. O for others. So let's let group +r. So now with the changes that I've made, anyone who is either me or a member of the TA081 project is able to read this file. But other people, like me from a different account, can no longer see that file because I've not given them the right. If I give everyone else the right to see things, I'm not able to see it. So why am I talking about permissions? Well, the reason I'm talking about permissions is that quite often the reason you're putting files into shared directories is to let other people see it. Like, why would you share it if you don't want other people to see it? If you're not careful about your permissions, you may copy something into the shared directory and they might not be able to access it. So to that end, we've got suggestions here of if you want to copy over a directory, make sure to run things like group others plus read, maybe plus execute if you're sending any executables, for any directories that you're copying into the shared files. So I think the way that William has phrased it is, rather than just writing a file, he'd rather than writing a .hello.txt file, he just outright copied a directory, which I'm happy to do as well. It would look something like minus -r recursive ta081.js, and let's just copy that one to here, and now it's there. And actually permissions are fine. Everyone's got read, write, execute, read and execute, read and execute. So everyone should be able to go into and see that directory. But always make sure with the permissions. And if you've copied something over and someone says, I've not been able to see it, it might be the permissions. Have a look. So system software. ARCHER2 runs the Cray Linux environment, which is based on the SUSE Enterprise Linux. The service officially supports the bash script, and you'll notice I've mainly been using bash, but we've also got, I'm pretty sure we've got Z shell, C shell, that sort of things are available. And as well as that hardware and system software, HPE supply a number of packages. They supply compilers, so they supply the GNU compiler suite, the Cray compiler suite, and there's also AMD compilers. They supply parallel libraries such as the Cray MPI, which is based on MPICH. There's also OpenSH and SHMem, and there's global arrays. They supply a number of scientific and numerical libraries, things like BLAST-LAPACK, SCALAPACK, that sort of thing. There's also FFTW for fast Fourier transforms, HDF5 for, I think it's HDF5 is multiple cores writing to the same file. It's an IO code from memory. Likewise with NetCFD. Debugging tool, we'll be talking about things like GDB for HPC and CrayPath, which is a profiler. We'll be doing exercises on that on Monday. And a number of things like an optimized version of Python 3, which is made to work super fast on the ARCHER2 environment, within the ARCHER2 environment, which has MPI4Py, NumPy, SciPy. And there's also an optimized version of R. For anyone who used Archer, the main differences are there's now an optimized version of Python 3 and R, and there's no Intel compilers. So the ARCHER2 processor is an AMD processor, the ARCHER1 processor was an Intel processor, and so there's no Intel compilers. It says here there's no MKL libraries. That's not quite true. We've installed our own, as in we. The ARCHER2 support team has installed our own MKL libraries, which means that if you really want MKL, we've got it available for you. And lack of ARMForge, DDT debugger, and map profiler. I think, again, that's not true either. I think we've changed that. Eleanor can let me know if I'm wrong. Now, on top of the Cray provided software, the ARCHER2 systems, the ARCHER2 support team, the CSE service team, of which Eleanor and I are a part of, we provide and make sure that a number of often used research software is available. And we've got things like molecular and molecular modeling, things like ChemShell, which I talked about, and CASTEP, which I talked about before. We've got LAMMPS, GROMAPS for biomolecular modeling, Quantum Espresso. I'd say GROMAPS and NAMPI can also be used for molecular modeling. Anyways, we've got engineering codes like Phoenix, OpenFOAM, or Code Saturn. We've got some Earth system modeling like MIPGMC, the Met Office Unified Model, and a couple of NEMOs on there. And then we've also added a couple of scientific libraries, things like Boost or Icon or PETSI, Parmetis, and some software tools as well, like ParaView, Plumed, PyTorch, that sort of thing. Now, some of those are licensed softwares, and I've already kind of like jumped the gun on this one, but if you've got any licensed software, you can, if you've got a license for some of the licensed software available on ARCHER2, so let's say something like VASP, you can request access to that by going on Safe, going on your user account, request access to package, and then let's go with VASP. It'll tell you instructions. So the account, this is who's asking for it, this is the package group, and then it asks for details. And here you'll be asked, if you purchased your VASP license, then please let us know so we can contact us with a copy of your license agreement. And there it says at the very top, please supply your email address that is registered for VASP 6 access. And yeah, so I need to supply my email address. In this case, this is just a test, so please don't process this as it's a test. And then I click submit, and my packet has been requested. Now at this point, it'll generate an automatic ticket within the ARCHER2 service desk. The operator will see that and will contact the VASP developer team to check whether or not I'm allowed access to VASP. In this case, hopefully they'll say no, because I've said please say no. But I am allowed to have access to VASP. One of the things we do is, because your license is, you're named under your license for VASP specifically, that's the case. If you have multiple accounts, like I do, and if any of your accounts, like say this one, has access to VASP, like say, this one's got access to a ton of things, then sometimes they'll say, oh, you've already got access to that package from another account, which means you're allowed access in this account. So here you go, you've got access, which can speed up the process a bit. So more information about the software that's available on ARCHER2 can be found in the documentations. And again, I kind of jumped the gun on that one, but if you go on research software, all of those codes that I was talking about, they each have a page. And let's go with the LAMMPS one, because I quite like LAMMPS. I'm a former molecular dynamics person, so LAMMPS is my go-to. For each of them, we've got a wee blurb about what the code is, some information about what we've included in the central install. And then we've also got some example scripts. So here I've got if you wanted to run a job on 4 nodes, here's what you'd run. And then we've also got, very often we've got compilation instructions. It says if you want to build LAMMPS, we keep instructions for how we've compiled all of our scientific software in this repository. So if you go on apps, let's say you wanted, OpenFOAM is one that a lot of people like to build their own versions of because they've also often got their own libraries. You just go into OpenFOAM, find the one that you're interested in. Let's say this one, which is the latest OpenFOAM. This will be .com version. Oh, but that's for Ceres. I'm not interested in Ceres. I want ARCHER2. So fine, I guess it'll be 2012. And here we've got instructions, a README for how to install it. And if you follow these instructions, you should be able to compile your own version. Okay, so what about your research? That's probably more of an in-person thing to do, but if anyone wants to, we're about to break for lunch, but if anyone wanted to talk about your specific research and give everyone, especially me, an idea of the sort of research you're interested in, which might maybe help gear the exercises or tests that I'm doing going forward, I'd suggest if you want to write a couple of sentences about it in the Etherpad, that would be very helpful. Otherwise, it is now 12, which means we're still perfectly on time for lunch. I'm happy to stay for a couple of minutes to take any questions that you will have. And by all means, please do ask questions. And also, please let me know if I'm going too quickly, too slowly, if this is all stuff you already knew, if this is stuff you're interested in. That will be very helpful for me to gauge how we go going forward. Yeah, if you have, yeah, there's.
Yes, so it's happy to see that you provide all the modules for different applications. But is it good also for us developers to compile the code? For example, we try to experiment with the branches of the new software versions. Is it okay?
Yeah, of course. The reason that we keep centrally installed software and we keep centrally managed software is because it is software that is used a lot by a lot of users. The version that we keep is a very standard version. It's not a development version. We don't play around with any of the source code. We download it and we compile it as it is. as it is once the developers say it's okay for us to do. So so if you are doing tests on that, then yes, you should be compiling your own version, because we will not be wanting to compile 27 versions a day as you add new functionalities to, let's say, Apprentice in this case.
Yeah.
And actually, even, you know, like what you do within your directory, you know, as I showed earlier, actually, I can't see in anyone else's directory, even though I'm one of the project managers for TA081. I cannot see in this directory. I cannot see in, I don't know, just randomly, let's go with that one. Oh, YDI. LS. Here we go. I can't see in anyone's directory. So what you do within your directory, I'll never be able to see. So there is no way for us to even begin to enforce stopping people from compiling their own programs. And even if there was, we wouldn't be doing that, because we're aware that ARCHER2 is for researchers, and that researchers will be doing things that are not necessarily standard and will be different from the, you know, off the beaten track of the packages that we're maintaining.
Yep. Thanks.
No worries.